chugging it. Oh, the Ready, is that a Ready State Yeti? Is that what that is?
This one, yeah.
You got the hookup. Hey guys, we are live. We are live, joined by Aaron Leventhal, the author of The New Fit. Here it is. How to own your fitness journey in your 40s, 50s, and beyond. How exciting. And as soon as I saw this, I believe I first saw you or heard of you on the Ready State, the mug you had there. And I was like, okay, he's talking about the same stuff I'm talking about, so I gotta see if I can connect with him. Hit you up on the socials, and here we are now doing this thing. And so your journey, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about it. I feel like you talk about it all the time, from being a soccer player to working as a strength and conditioning coach, and now owning the Fit, and for a few years now, the Fit Studio in Minneapolis. So if you want to talk a little bit about your background, don't want to take anything away from that, but I'd love to dive into the standards. That's the part I'm most excited about. But yeah, tell us a little about your journey.
Sure. Professional soccer player for 8 years. Now I'm old. So this was before Major League Soccer. This was in the A League. So I did that for 8 years. Retired from professional soccer, became the strength and conditioning coach, did that for 18 years, did that as the same team, which was the Minnesota Thunder, became Minnesota United, which is now our Major League Soccer team. So I did that. It was an 18-year stint doing that. And all the while, my wife and I owned a private training studio here in Minneapolis. So that's how I got here.
There you go. That was a nice summation. Before we proceed, I got to shout out my sponsor. And again, I know Ready State has their link, but here's my link, drinkelement.com, FitCare. I think they're the best electrolytes on the market. Delicious, nutritious. They grant all your wishes. I just came up with that. But drinkelement.com/FitCare. Aaron, are you a fan of the electrolytes, the elements? Have you worked with them?
For sure. So I have an 18-year-old who's a soccer player. He'll play in college, and I have a 12-year-old who's a soccer player, and Element has saved them more times than I can say when we have like back-to-back games or double headers over the weekend. That's their go-to.
Yeah, I think just for anyone who's participating in events like that, and I think for almost all ages, for every hour of sweaty exercise, I think you need a full packet. You need to be downing a full 30 ounces with that, and it just seems to keep you going. I did a half Ironman last year here in Boulder. It was like I was a little over 7 hours, and I definitely had one every hour, and I was just making sure to stay on top of that. It was like 90 degrees. Also, my first half Ironman. Pretty happy to get through that. That run was pretty miserable, but the element was getting me through that. So yeah. But I want to dive into it. First, we'll talk about your interest in exercise oncology. You had cancer yourself, if you want to talk about that experience. But I had another guest on recently, a friend of mine, Kenneth Lowe, who was a high-level cyclist. And he had a very rare form of cancer that he talks about his journey. And I want folks to go check that out there. But a lot of interesting stuff coming out about and trying to change that concept in oncology about getting exercise to be part of the prevention strategy, as well as for those getting diagnosed with cancer. But I'd love to hear your personal take and what we're seeing in the industry.
Sure. Yeah. Mine was a year and a half ago. I woke up on a Saturday morning, was here by myself, and got out of the shower, dried off, and I felt a lump. It was in the side of my chest, and I was like, that was not there last time I checked. So I knew something was wrong. Called my primary. Primary got me in. This was on like a Saturday, went on a Monday, sent me upstairs to get some imaging. It was a Tuesday. My lymph nodes were lit up. And then I think it was that same week I was in surgery and had a great surgery, took out the mass that was in my chest, took out lymph nodes. And then I was on treatment for a year. I had a very rare form of an aggressive breast cancer, which it's very rare in men. So that was my diagnosis. And I think exercise oncology, the reason why I think it's important to talk about exercise oncology is because, you know, I guess with my experience, what happened was I was on this treatment that it was awful for me. It was hard. I couldn't train. My joints were achy. Lost my hair, lost 20 pounds of muscle, couldn't sleep. And I know a lot of people who have a similar experience with side effects with many different types of treatments. But my cancer had a very high reoccurrence rate. So it had a 50% chance of coming back. And so the treatment was a no-brainer for me, as much as I had to suffer. What ended up happening, however, was I dove into the research, and I found that by doing specific types of, by using exercise to elicit a specific response, a specific type of response, there was a lot of research out there that showed like a 78% reduction in reoccurrence. And so I was able to come off the medication, the treatment, and utilize exercise as a way to mitigate my risk. Now, that's what was specific to me, specific to my age, specific to my cancer type. By no means am I telling people go off of your treatment. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is there's a lot of research out there, and the issue is that the research is very new in terms of like bulk research. I think the first roundtable was done in 2017 in terms of exercise oncology. And I think in 2022, the amount of clinical work and research was increased by like 340%, which is, that's shocking. What basically that means is like, 2017, we're onto something. And then 2022, like, you know, you're onto something when that much money gets poured into research to try and figure out what outcomes and how we can use this what's being done in the lab to kind of work directly with patients. So the gap, just so you know, Bo, the gap is right now is, number one, the research is out there. Number two, we don't know how to implement it. Number three, we don't have practitioners who can implement it. And then number four is, even for me, I went through surgery and treatment, and my oncology team told me, just rest. And what we know now is that at different stages of cancer, movement is, across all stages, movement is better. It's just what type of movement. So that's exercise oncology. It's very new. People don't yet understand what it is. And so I think it's important for people who are going through treatment to know, like, there is another form of treatment that can not only help with outcomes, but it can help with side effects tremendously.
Yeah. And I think, again, the other part that you mentioned it, you said that your specific type of cancer, but I think that's a piece there that the research is just so difficult because the term cancer oncology is such a wide field. And again, breast cancer versus prostate cancer versus a neuroblastoma, like you can go down the rabbit hole of these, and it's really hard, I think, to study. And again, something the gold standard of research is clinical trials and placebo controlled and double blind and all this stuff, and it's just really hard to do that in that oncology space where there's definitely, it's a slow moving ship, to say the least. And yeah, people say exercise is medicine, movement is medicine. But yeah, I think we're going to see some of that come together, and hopefully, really glad to hear it worked for you. And again, my friend Ken, that was on the other episode that we recently did. And so I think there's a lot of potential there, and it's really hard for folks going through it, I know, to say, how do I get moving? And I feel like cruddy, to say the least. And it's saying, you gotta find that right mix and work with your team to find the right path forward there. So yeah, I'm excited to see how that comes along, because unfortunately cancer doesn't seem like it's going anywhere anytime soon unless AI figures it out. But yeah, something that I think most folks are gonna have to deal with one way or another over these next few years. So yeah, especially as we age, it's something that affects somebody in your life most likely, and definitely appreciate you again sharing that knowledge on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do. I think it's important for people know.
Yeah, and then we'll pop over to fit standards. So again, you know, some folks when it's a main part of my own business here as a physical therapist. That's where, again, as soon as I heard you on the Ready State podcast there, I was like, I got to talk to this guy, get his book as soon as I could. And then, you know, I'd love to hear again, what, you know, I kind of read through the book and getting through the thinking, the thought process. Again, I think folks should go check it out themselves, but take us a little bit through what, you know, led you to write the book. You know, what do you feel is missing in the world? And I think we're going to kind of agree. And if folks have been listening to my rants and these podcasts here, they probably know already how I feel. And I think we overlap a lot of our thoughts, but let's hear it from Mr. Leventhal.
Yeah. I mean, I think the reason I wrote the book was because I saw a real big gap between kind of the idea of people wanting to understand their wellness and being able to take meaningful experiences that they could have in the realm of exercise and fitness, and have those be something that was real, had a basis to it, that had science to it, and then sort of just being able to reshape this idea of like how we're moving and why we're moving the way we're moving. I mean, it's so strange that, you know, we go into these buildings and these buildings have machines in them, and we get on these machines and they have to play music, and you have to have someone who's in spandex on a mic and that's how most people exercise. You sort of follow along, and there's so much more to it, from the emotional side of it to the science side of it. And it can be so much more impactful for so many people. So that was one reason. The other reason is letting people know, like, hey, there are fitness standards, there's movement standards that are designed to be helpful. They're designed to help you know where to start. They're designed to let you know how you compare to other people of the same age and the same gender. They're designed to help predict longevity. They're designed to help predict injury. But we don't, especially as we age, we just don't think of those things. We just sort of check the box and show up at the gym, if we do, and we just sort of do what everyone else is doing. And I feel like I wanted to write the book to help people understand how they could own their own journey and make it specific to what they need.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's been my struggle as well. And I think of saying, you know, can you stand on one leg for 30 seconds? I actually just had a chapter published in a book about Healthy for Life, and that's with 24 other co-authors. So that's kind of a heavy book, so to speak. But my chapter, less than 3,000 words, it was about movement vital signs. Again, a little bit tying into some of the stuff that the Starrettes talk about there with the Ready State, getting up and down off the ground, grip strength, some of these metrics that we know are correlated to better quality of life, longer life, longevity, all that kind of stuff, and changing this conversation from just health span to lifespan. I think, again, shout out to Dr. Peter Attia, Outlive. I think, you know, I'm sure I assume you're a fan of his.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. You can talk trash here. No, it's fine. If you don't like him, this is the place. No, it's but yeah, you know, in terms of how we're changing that conversation around, again, fitness and why people are working out. And again, if it's not moving the needle in the right way, you know, some people just look at the scale. I think that's a short-sighted view. And so, yes, as a strength and conditioning coach, I think you're coming at it with a very interesting perspective. And again, overlapping our experiences and saying, like, let's have a way that we can measure this. Now, outside of your book, I guess, you know, I think you're doing the thing, the Starrettes are doing the thing. And I had them on this show actually a while ago, and I kind of asked them, what do you think is there hope for health and industry and the fitness industry to kind of get together and say, let's have a bit more universality and standards outside of how many pull-ups can you do, how much can you bench, bro? Maybe, you know, now there's high rocks or something. It's whatever that thing is. Do you have any hope, I guess, based on the specificity of your book, to say, outside of what you're doing? And they said, by the way, when I asked them that, they said, be the node, be the person in your community, be the person in your network, social media, whatever it is. be the node, be the one that's kind of setting that tone. But I guess my question is do you think there's any hope of, and again, we're recording this 2025. I don't want to get political, RFK, whatever of all that. But is there any hope that either all the big personal training companies, all the big gyms, whatever that fitness industry is, that you think there'll be something, or even medical doctors, we're talking about exercise oncology, that there's going to be this implementation or standardization, as I think in the 60s, JFK had the presidential fitness tests. And so do you see any hope of anything like that coming up? Maybe AI is going to figure it out. I don't know. But do you see anything where folks are going to be able to come together on this?
I do, because I think people now more than ever want, as we get unhealthier, I think now more than ever, people want answers. And I think that what we're talking about is changing sort of this idea of, again, like I just go move to like, there has to be some intention to it. And people are seeing that the correlation. Listen, most people understand the more lean muscle I have, the longer I live, the less early onset of comorbidity. And people understand that, but they don't yet have the knowledge to put that into practice. And so I think people want it. I think the fitness industry in general will continue to evolve. I think we'll change from something that is a little bit more aesthetic, more fluff, to something that's more science driven. How that happens, I don't know. I do think that's right, what Kelly and Juliet Starrett say, which is like, look, own your own little community, own your part of the world, and help support people in a way that is meaningful. And by the way, nothing wrong with, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, what's your bench press, how much do you deadlift, how fast can you, finish Murph, whatever it is, all great. I just think there's 95% of the population who can't use those metrics. They don't make sense. A, they don't make sense to them. B, they don't have the experience to compete, to even find out what generally that type of strength, how that they would be represented there. And so what we do have to do is we have to find other ways to show people, not just how to compare yourself to others, but we have to find ways to show how you compare yourself to others who are living a life that has more of an optimal health, they're healthier. And their cultures, there's science in those cultures too that can give us that information. And so I think it's important to find that and to get that information to the hands of people so they can start to test themselves. They can see where they're at. Listen, it's no surprise that people, when they are not moving and they know they need to be moving because they're unhealthy, it's no surprise that they have to jump on a very fast moving train for most people. And what that means is they're going to fail. It's going to be too hard. It's going to be too boring. They're not going to see results. And so these standards, this idea of like, hey, can I get up and down off the floor without using my appendages? Can I do a certain number of squats, touch my butt to a bench? This is helpful because this gives people information as to where to start, as opposed to just doing what he's doing or doing what she's doing because it worked for her or him. So I think, yeah, to answer your question, yes, 100%. I think it's coming. I don't know when. We can dive into the discussion of like, how does personal training get standard certifications? How does that happen? Is that the right thing? I don't know. I do know there's an issue there. I can say that certainly 100%, because I can have my next door neighbor throw up a sign that says, Beth's gym, and she does, hula hooping, and you stand under the, stairs on your head and drink apple cider vinegar. And like, that's going to solve all your problems. So there is an issue and there's a gap to close. I don't know how it happens exactly, but people want it. That's what I do know.
Yeah, I'll share from the physical therapy space. You know, I was a student 2005 to 2008. Even then, I think it had been something that we were talking about of having an annual orthopedic screen and being the musculoskeletal experts. You know, I don't know the back end of why that never got adopted. You know, dentists are like, you got to go get your teeth checked twice a year. You know, car mechanics, vets, they say you got to do this, this, and this. Pediatricians, we accept these things. Physical therapy tried to own that, and I think as a profession, you know, being in it, I did not think about this going into this profession specifically, and investing over or hundreds of thousands of dollars in getting this degree. You know, I think that it was frustrating to see how poorly they are with marketing. And again, that's where, like, you know, chiropractors did a great job. Like, everyone, oh, I got back pain, I got to go see a chiropractor. It's in rap songs, it's in movies, it's in all this kind of stuff. They just did a really great job marketing. You know, I'd wish my profession stepped up. Personal training is another piece of that puzzle that, again, like, where's the fitness? Where's the strength and conditioning coach? You know, I love these terms and labels, and wellness is now a thing, right? And all these different aspects. But, you know, I don't know what's going to come back. I keep saying, I want to have an annual orthopedic screen. I think every single human being, especially when every year older you get, the more important it is that you do this, you know, to be able to test your movement, what's the quality of movement, have somebody who understands what they're looking at and say, hey, your hip internal rotation is actually getting a little wonky there. Maybe we should start working on that. Otherwise, it's going to get a little worse. And again, to some of these fitness standards that you talk about, I'll let you go. Sorry, I want to keep running.
No, I think that, you know, I think what you're saying is right. But listen here, like, you have to answer the question as to why. Like, why do I want to know that? Why do I need that knowledge as a consumer, right? So why do I need to go through your screen as a consumer? And ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but my guess is you're going to say, like, I can save you a lot of pain and a lot of money if I can screen you today as opposed to 5 years from now. That's my guess. So that's number one. But the fitness standards do the exact same thing, because all of these are predicting, either they're predicting injury, they're predicting risk of heart disease, they're predicting something that is a comorbidity down the line. That's number one. Number two is, you know, as a physical therapist, and this is a question to you, I'm really curious, like, your board certifications, like, how much does that close the gap? How much does that change the spectrum of, I go see Bo in clinic and I get A, B, and C, as opposed to I go see someone else in clinic? Am I going to be on the other end of the spectrum? Because in personal training, even in strength and conditioning, in my world, like I said, like, I could have a really good practice that focuses on movement and mechanics and really good inputs to get the right outputs. And at Beth's gym, we light candles and we hula hoop and jump on trampolines. And it might be fun, but it's not science-based. And so, I think there's people need to know why, and then B, we've got to find a way to close that spectrum, to make it that, yes, you can do that. You can do the trampoline thing, but you have to have the education behind it. You got to know what you're doing. Right now, people don't know. And they don't know what it means to have an orthopedic screen. They have no idea what the benefit is. And to your point, they think they know when they go to a chiropractor, but they probably don't.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm trying to follow Kelly and Juliet here and say, you know, yeah, I'm just going to grab everyone I can, get them in my door, teach them this stuff, and you know, if I'm in a very I'm in an affluent enough area, A, and B, I'm in a very active area. So there's plenty of humans who start investing in their health. But yeah, again, just like the dentist, why do you go to the dentist? You know, you're supposed to go every 6 months. I don't know that everyone does, but I try to do that. And it's the same thing. You're trying to catch these things that, look at those teeth. Look at those teeth right there, folks. Beautiful teeth. So you're trying to catch these things in advance, and so that you don't develop these issues. And again, you know, total knee replacements, total hip replacements. These are things that you have to do the work early on. Yeah, I guess to you, maybe you've done a little more research than I've even done on this. Is in terms of you mentioned lean muscle mass is a main indicator of our overall longevity and quality of life, right? So why are DEXA scans so hard to get? Why are insurance companies only covering them when you're above the age of 60? I mean, we know some of the science and the business and all that, but yeah, I mean, do you think there's any ways that folks can start getting ahead of it that way?
I do. I think they can. I mean, let's talk about grip strength real quick, right? Not everybody can measure grip strength on a dynamometer.
Dynamometer. $25 on Amazon. I'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah. And not everyone's going to do it. Not everyone wants to do it. A, and then B, like, what's it mean? Right? I mean, you should be able to, based on your age and gender, you should be able to pull a certain number. I don't know it off the top of my head, but you should. And that tells you something about your upper body strength.
I'll just say real quick. I'll just say real quick. I work with a hand therapist. So she deals with that for injuries and things like that, and talks about those normative values. And I got really deep into this a few weeks ago, actually, with her. And I didn't actually realize this. The main normative data, when you talk about those age matched kind of controls and things like that, that data is from like the early 80s. It's from like 1983 or 84, something like that. So I was born in 83 for funsies, and so it hasn't been updated. I think probably those numbers probably would actually be lower if they were to kind of update it, I imagine, because I think as an overall society, especially Americans, we've gotten weaker. I would venture to say that. And so, maybe that's one of the reasons they haven't updated those numbers. I don't know. But yeah, something to think about. So I wanted to throw that into that piece of the conversation.
So here's another way to think about it, is to find research that's more current and it's a little bit more relevant. So like in the book, I talk a little bit of a dead hang. And what I do is I make a comparison to a group in Trinidad Tobago. They had I think they had a average lifespan of, I want to say like 98 years old, 95 years old. It was like a blue zone, like barely not a blue zone. The point is they worked in the field all day long. They moved all day long. They were super healthy. And they had grip strength that measured off the chart. And so that's relevant and that's current. And now you're comparing your grip strength in a controlled study. You're comparing your grip strength to those people who are living longer. They're less later onset of comorbidity. And it was really simple. They could hang from a bar for 2 minutes or more. And so now you're talking about relative strength too. But there's a lot of ways to kind of be creative and put these ideas together so that someone could just go to the playground and be like, hey, where am I? Because it's important to know. Because as your grip strength deteriorates, your muscle deteriorates, and that has an effect on a lot of things downstream. And by the way, we can do the same thing with lower body strength endurance. We can do a 1 minute squat test. Again, relevant science, a 2017 study. This was done in Switzerland. Top 3 in life expectancy, bottom 3 in healthcare costs. I want to say 73% of the population between age 44 and 64 are active. That's shocking. I think we're at like 17% here. Healthy population, healthy culture, hiking, skiing, running. The government decides to take 7,000 people. They put them through a lower body squat endurance test. They say, can you squat to I think it's a 18-inch bench for 1 minute? How many can you do? They find that the mean in that demographic was 50 air squats in 1 minute. What they found was if you were below 50, your risk of, I think they measured, one of the big measurements was heart disease. Your risk dropped by 23% of heart disease. So it's significant. It's easy to do, and it means something to someone who's taking that test. So yes, we need those tests. We need to get those type of tests. We need more of those tests. We need people like you who can break down movement in a more mechanical way, where you can, you could probably give me 3 tests right off the top of your head. Can you do this to test internal rotation at your hip or external rotation at your shoulder? And say like, hey, look, if you're not there, you're like, here's what you're leaving on the table. And by the way, if you're not there and you like to play basketball or you like to play soccer, like now your risk just went up by like 50% more. All those things are meaningful. People want that information. They just don't know how to get it. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's not enough clinicians who, I think, clinicians, trainers, strength and conditioning, all these different, again, wellness experts, all these different folks that, and unfortunately, again, I talk about this with my personal trainer buddy back in New York City on my other podcast, the Demand Better podcast. And unfortunately, we kind of like to be the old man yelling at the wind, so to speak, of these young trainers, and folks like to, they have their shirts off, six pack out and all that. And like, they're not necessarily as experienced as my buddy. He's 57. He's been in the training space, I think, over 30 something years. I've been in the fitness space and health space for over 20 years. Between us, you'd think that folks would, and again, we're not over here like, why don't we get more followers? But at the same time, like, yeah, it's unfortunate. I think the folks doing the work and putting the messages out there probably aren't putting as much time. And there's a bunch of people who are doing great. Again, Kelly, Juliet, you got this book out. I'm excited to, again, see if we can spread this message a little bit more. But unfortunately, again, we got to cut through that fluff, I think is my point of all that, of there's just so much. There's a chiropractor. I'll share this real quick. I just got into it. She posted like, don't do these functional movements. And she said, do these instead. And I was kind of like, I was just challenging her. I think she's targeting women in their 40s, actually, ironically. And so she's just really big on hypertrophy. Again, my understanding, her only training is chiropractic. And again, she looks like she has like 80,000 followers on Instagram. And I was like, okay, like what are you talking about here? Why shouldn't people do this? Or like her push-up that she demonstrated, I was like, why don't you do full range of motion? Like I'm just very confused by your posts. And I kind of like was trying to engage in a conversation. She kind of spoke back to me a little negatively, as social media does. So I invited her to come on this podcast and talk about it. But basically, I was like, she responded in a comment saying something about, doing lateral raises, which I said I think it's a fairly useless exercise. She said those help prevent frozen shoulder. I'd love to see the research or rationale behind that. And again, I'd love to hear her full thought process. And bottom line is, she has 80,000 followers. She might be doing some good for some folks and getting them moving in the right direction. And again, this is the other piece of the puzzle too, where I'd love to hear your take on it. Is I feel like we are in a society where so many folks are not moving at all. It's tough to be like, hey, don't listen to her because she doesn't know what she's talking about. This particular chiropractor. Well, I'll keep picking on. But it's hard to be like, yeah, like I think there's a negative piece of like people bashing on CrossFit. Again, my co-host, I mentioned Corona there in the other podcast. He hates CrossFit. He thinks it's done poorly all the time. Most of the time, I should say. He'll be like, Bo knows what he's doing, but most CrossFit people don't know what they're doing. And I'm like, okay, like how is that useful? Can we have a more nuanced conversation about it? So again, I don't know how do we bring, again, this level, the raising the bar of the standard? I think that was a little bit of this running theme within our conversation here of, I don't know that there is an answer. I don't know that ACE and ACSM and NSCA can get better involved, or they're going to come together and say, let's, again, raise up these concepts. There's too much money, I think, involved, but I don't know. That's my rant.
No, I think that's right. I think you're 100% right. I think so, but you have to look at it in terms of like, look at it on a continuum, right? So you're 100% right when you say like, okay, someone who's not moving at all, and this Cairo is saying like you should do lateral raises for frozen shoulder. I don't know. But you're like, okay, at least you're moving. At least I got you moving, which is a good thing. But this is what I think is going to happen. So I think that people are going to want to have more information. So I think, what's the fitness industry growing by right now? It's shocking, right? Like it's growing globally. It's growing very fast. You look at like, I just saw this stat the other day that 10 years ago, it was like 7% of Americans wore like a fitness wearable. And now we're at like 27%. That's huge growth over the course of 10 years. But my point is like all the science point in this direction, which says like, hey, people are genuinely more interested in just being like, I want to show up to a fitness class, or, I want to run a marathon, or whatever it is. They're more interested. They want more in depth. They want to know about lifestyle, they want to know about nutrition, they want to know about movement. I do think we're getting there. And so I think what happens at the end of the day is, Dr. Bo does a really good job. The Starettes do a really good job of kind of raising the standard a little bit. And I think over time, everything else gets flushed out. I'll be curious to see in 10 years from now what the fitness industry looks like. I mean, look, you can show up. I mean, look at Orange Theory. It's not, nothing against Orange Theory, but you can show up and you have data, like you have heart rate data. Now, what that means, but that was like, people just weren't interested in using that as a form of intensity. They didn't know how. And I'm not saying Orange Theory does or they do it right, but you can start to see the trend. We're going in this direction where people are like, I'm curious. I want information. And so I think whenever you look at anything else, you're like, well, when people do want information, I think the potent, true science-driven information will eventually float to the top because those inputs that you're prescribing get the right outputs. I'll say that, but I'll also say that you have to look at movement and fitness beyond just the science, because the woman who is a chiropractor who has 80,000 followers or whatever, I don't know what she's doing, but people feel a sense of trust. They feel a sense of connection. They feel, a sense of community. Those are important things that go into a fitness practice as well. I always say, like, first pillars are connection. Like, that's the first principle of any good movement practice, feeling connected to it, loving it, having passion about it, thinking about it when you're not doing it, being excited about it. That comes through, a coach that you are inspired by, that comes through a community that makes you feel supportive. It comes through competition. Sometimes it comes through camaraderie. All those things are like first principles of any movement practice. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable for me to show up at a CrossFit and be like, I hate this. I dread it. I don't ever want to come back. And eventually I'm gonna be like, I don't want to do it. And so we have to take that into consideration. We have to take into consideration this idea of like, well, people now want knowledge. They do. They want to understand how to get stronger. They want to understand what it means to do, interval training, whatever it is. They want to know why. And then there also has to be a progression. Those are sort of these three pillars that I think people will eventually start to gravitate towards. Because right now it is, I'll just show up. Like you said to do it, so I guess I should just go do it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm hopeful that, again, we start getting a little more purpose. And I do think the Surrettes were one of the first to talk about the concept of, like, that I've heard, movement practice. And, like, again, what is your actual practice? I think, again, in I have a bunch of neighbors actually that they were like, hey, Bo, you know stuff about this. You're in the medical profession. I do yoga and play pickleball. Could I possibly have osteoporosis? I just got diagnosed with. I was like, there's some missing pieces to that puzzle. And again, Aaron's laughing here, guys, and it is what it is. But, like, yeah, I think just folks and like the doctor's not educated on it, or they're not sharing that information of, like, you need bone loading. Like, we need to work on this. There's this huge disconnect in the medical field, the fitness space. That's kind of where we're always talking about bridging that gap. And yes, I don't know where the money lies. I don't know how AI is going to play into it. I'd love to figure all these things out. But again, I think as of now, I'm even more motivated. And again, thanks to your book, I'm going to put the link in the show notes of, challenging folks to, again, hang more, to do these things and carry stuff. Coach Dan John, he likes to simplify stuff. One of my favorite folks in the space. I'm still waiting for him to jump on here. I think I sent him a message a while ago, and he's a little harder to nail down, but I'm not as big a dog as some of the podcasts he goes on. I appreciate you being on here again. But yes, I think that, the hope is there. I think conversations like these hopefully start to raise that level a little bit, 1%, a little bit more every time. So yes, Aaron, I want to be respectful of your time. I have a 2.5-year-old I got to get to upstairs as well. But just want to finish up with asking again, where can folks reach out to you, and any other closing messages, and leave us with some hope, man. Leave us with some hope.
Well, we're in good hands with people like you, people like the Starrettes. You've had other guests that, these are, again, I do think that, you clearly have a passion for your work. And I think that people who want to help, they're going to end up being very useful. People can find me find me on social, Aaron-Leventhal, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever, or you can hit me up on my websites, aaron-leventhal.com. And I'm happy to chat with anyone, happy to point you in the right direction.
Go get his book. Amazon link will be in the show notes wherever you guys are watching or listening to this. And Aaron, thank you so much for your time. Yeah, again, I think I'm hopeful, like you said, that we can get this good information out there, get folks kind of taking a little bit more ownership of their own health with all of the information out there. I feel like these last maybe even like 10 years, maybe, if I say so, I think it's just been a flood of information. Again, all these wearables, all the different Apple Watches, even Google tried Google Health. You know, I feel like, and I don't know if they just gave up on it or it was just too difficult, but I think that, again, hopefully things like these fitness standards will help us kind of start guiding in the right direction. I do think Dr. Atia Huberman, some of these folks, these influencers, Rhonda Patrick, hopefully will help, again, get people a little bit more aware. I hesitate to say Joe Rogan. I don't think he puts up enough. I don't know how you feel about him, but I don't know. That's a whole nother, we won't open that can of worms, but but on that note, guys, we'll take off. I hope you got at least 1% better. I know I did today with this conversation.